additional other generating capacity coming online as well. So to put some quick context to the numbers, so nuclear is 5,200 megawatts is coming online. Currently, we have 1,800 megawatts at Kuberg, which is 2 units of 900 megawatts each. And the target by 2039 is 25,000 megawatts of solar, 34,000 megawatts of wind, 16,000 megawatts of gas, and then battery energy storage, 8,500 megawatts, and lastly, distributed generation, which is solar on rooftops, being 16,000 megawatts. So there's a whole bunch of additional, apart from nuclear, other sources of energy that are coming on, and it's going to be an energy mix that's going to greatly reduce our carbon footprint as a country. So that's in the context of that, nuclear is kind of just a small portion of it, but it does take a lot of upfront capital of that 2.2 trillion amount that you mentioned.
So that is the amount, the 2.2 trillion that's set to be invested in energy infrastructure. What do you estimate the capital cost of the proposed nuclear build will be, and how does it compare with alternatives such as renewable energy?
Great. So just to put to context, that 2.2 trillion rand, that's not investment from the government. That's what they've estimated the total investment amount will be. And they're looking to foreign direct investments, other nations as well. And we've heard of commitments from the EU and also from other developed nations that's going to be assisting us in our just energy transition. So that's the amount, that 2.2 trillion, that is kind of calculated from the RRP, from the government side, in terms of when you add up everything together, then it's going to be that amount that's needed to be invested. Also from the banks in South Africa and private capital. Interestingly, they haven't given much details about their guarantees that they're going to be providing for that. So it doesn't seem like they actually are, from their side, like giving much clarity as yet. We are going to see more clarity as there's going to be rollouts of information from now the approved plan to the public. And part of that as well is that we don't have clarity on the portions that has been allocated in their thinking of nuclear versus wind and solar. But just to give some idea in terms of the way that it works with nuclear is you have 90% of your capital cost upfront for the building of the nuclear power station, and then only 10% for all of the fueling and the maintenance of the power station and running of it. And that's very different to solar and wind, where you put down the money also up front, but then within 6 months to a year, you've got the electricity flowing, whereas the nuclear, it's 8 to 10 years. So that's the kind of issue that's being debated now, of like, does it make sense in the context of current financial constraints to be putting a whole bunch of money aside for nuclear or not?
Now, the plan mentions the revival of small modular reactors as well as other nuclear technologies. You did touch on that briefly as well. What are the challenges and benefits of these newer nuclear technologies for the country?
Great. So yeah, what's really exciting about the small modular reactors is that it was a technology that was actually developed in South Africa 5 years ago, or 25 years ago. So it's kind of from here that we created the fourth generation that's now being rolled out across the world. So they've got some commercial plants that are deployed in China and some recent ones that are going up in America. So it's a pity that it was deprioritized by the government because we would have been the world leaders in this technology if it had continued on its trajectory that it was. But as we know, the previous presidency, there were some interruptions and things that have been revealed in the Zondo Commission regarding state capture. But if that wasn't the case, what would be the current reality is that we'd be world leaders with this pebble bed reactor, and the benefits of this reactor in particular is that it doesn't need to have a whole bunch of water to cool the reactor, as it's a stable reactor without any water. It's gas cooled, so it's a small amount, a small footprint, and you can have 100 megawatts deployment of a reactor. So you don't have to have like a Kuberg where you have 900 megawatts. So you can have them dotted around the country at small villages, supplying electricity where it's needed without any water demand. Some downsides though are, unfortunately, there's no commercial units that are in operation of the pebble bed modular reactor that we're going to be deploying. So it still has to go through a whole life cycle of commercial viability, deployment, proof of concept, and then rolling out. So that will even delay further the implementation of nuclear in South Africa.
Matthew, we thank you so much for your insight this afternoon. Really looking forward to see how this is going to be moving forward as far as the energy plan in South Africa. And once again, a focus on nuclear. We thank you for your time, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew Cruz, energy expert at Empower. He takes us to exactly 16 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is 17 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time as we turn our focus now to Botswana. The credit ratings agency Moody's has downgraded Botswana's rating to Baa1 from A3, citing the government's challenges in adjusting to a structural downturn in the diamond industry and the increasing government debt. In a statement, Moody's says that Botswana's economy is likely to decline by an additional 6% in 2025 as it remains exposed to global demand shocks and technological disruption from lab-grown alternatives, and also changes in consumer preferences, also a huge influence there. To bring us into greater detail is independent policy researcher Kevin Tutani. Kevin, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Thami. My pleasure.
So, Kevin, how will a lower credit rating likely affect Botswana's borrowing costs as well as access to external capital?
Essentially, I expect that it means it's going to be it's going to actually investors, right, who are mostly institutional investors, are going to demand a higher rate of interest for whatever debt they give to the government of Botswana. So essentially, it's going to be harder to acquire debt. It's going to be expensive.
And in an environment of weaker global diamond demand, and this is something we've really touched on quite extensively here on Africa in business, we have seen a rise in lab-grown alternatives. What risks, and external risks specifically, does this pose to Botswana going forward?
Well, look, things are changing, but we cannot rule out the fact that the more that Botswana can market its diamonds, its natural diamonds, the better prices they can fetch within the market. I've always been given an example of the difference between natural black opal and synthetic black opal. There's a marked price difference between the two. But because natural black opal has better qualities, more enduring qualities than synthetic opal. So if there is reduced marketing around the advantages of natural black opal, as an example, it's going to fetch less money within the market. So it's really more about marketing than anything else. Botswana has to get on the drive to market its natural diamonds. They have more inherent qualities. They have better inherent qualities than the synthetic ones, really. So they can team up with Russia, as I've always been saying, and other countries that are major producers of diamonds in the international market, and get on an aggressive marketing drive. And then we can see the lab-grown diamonds being displaced in terms of their prices in the international market.
Would you say that Botswana has been rather complacent?
I would agree, and I would say, yeah, I would suspect so. But then it can't be a one-man show. It can be a one-country show. They have to, at the very least, team up with other major producers. Thami, we're looking at Russia, as an example, India as an example, they themselves and other major producers, really. And then it has to be a combined effort. I think it can be more holistic that way, get better results that way.
Well, in the absence of that, and in the time span it will take to actually change, consumer behavior, and once again have diamonds be prime in the eyes of consumers, and if global demand still remains weak, what are the type of contingency plans that Botswana should put in place in order to manage the resultant revenue shortfall and the external financing stress?
Right. I think you're looking at a supply chain management review where the government has to look into how much it is spending within its procurement contracts. Okay. The government has to cut off any excess weight, any waste which is existing within its procurement contract. I'll give you an example. In South Africa in 2015, the National Treasury actually managed to determine that if the government of South Africa was going to streamline its purchasing of goods and services, it could save as much as 20% of its cost on goods and services, which would translate to around 3% of GDP. So Botswana can try to do the same, looking at central government, provincial government, mostly municipal government, which people obviously tend to overlook, but which in some cases spends more than the central government. If they try to streamline expenditure which is occurring within the three branches of government as Botswana, they can save up as much as probably 2 to 3% of GDP, which can take that deficit, that is budget deficit, fiscal deficit within each year, within the range of 4% of GDP or less. It's possible.
And how would you say, Kevin, investors ought to be looking at this investment downgrade? Is it already worked into the market pricing of Botswana's bonds or their assets? And is perhaps a further downgrade likely?
Well, if nothing is done by Botswana to change what's going on, I expect that a further downgrade is likely, because the price of natural diamonds, as we have said, the outlook of it shows that it's going to keep on going down. That's the price of natural diamonds. Botswana has issues with scarcity of water. Botswana has other structural issues. Unemployment within the country is around 27%, which is quite hectic. But if the government shows that it doesn't have a feasible plan which can move things forward, then we will definitely, most likely, see another downgrade. But if it is seen to be doing something, then we can have a bit of stability in terms of that rating, and then things can get better. It can actually get an upgraded rating.
Kevin Tutani, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thami.
Thank you. That's independent policy researcher Kevin Tutani on the downgrade by Moody's of Botswana. It's 23 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
We move from diamonds to gold. The gold prices reached an all-time high of $4,378.69 per ounce last week, and this is due to a combination of economic, geopolitical, as well as market factors. Investors have become positive about a potential U.S. interest rate cut. A cut in interest rates could lower the appeal of yield-bearing assets and boost demand for gold as a safe haven. Added to this, ongoing geopolitical tensions, including the difficult U.S.-China trade relations, have increased market uncertainty, driving investors to seek refuge in gold. To speak to us about how this impacts economies on the continent, we're joined this afternoon by Matthew Michael from Schroders. A very good afternoon to you, Matthew. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you too.
So, Matthew, what are the key factors behind the surge in the gold price that we've seen recently?
It's a good question, and I think it's one that we're being asked frequently. Over the last couple of years, specifically after 2022, we've seen central banks and official investors trying to accumulate their gold reserves in the cause of trying to diversify away from the US dollar and reduce their exposure to essentially developed market government bonds, for which they used to hold for reserve purposes. And of course, the gold market is relatively small if you compare it to other markets. And that has driven the price of gold up quite substantially. But now what we're beginning to see, it isn't just central banks and official institutions accumulating gold. As you mentioned, we've started to see investment portfolios starting to reallocate to gold, and private investors starting to allocate as well, having not been invested in this market for many, many years. So essentially that's created a dual bid for gold, which has driven the price to record highs.
Now, has the price increased for a long enough period in order for it to impact economies that are heavily reliant on the metal?
I think historically, and from our experience with the last bull market, which was between 2003 and roughly 2012, rising commodity prices comes with a number of benefits for those countries that are exporting them. Obviously on the trade account, but also the currency, as you see portfolio flows, as investors allocate to companies that are producing these materials. And of course in South Africa you have a number of gold mining companies which for many years have been essentially a very low proportion of international investors' portfolios. And if indeed, as we expect, the gold price to remain high and possibly keep on increasing, then naturally that's going to be a fantastic benefit for these underlying companies. And that in turn will help their stock prices as well as their currency as you see more portfolio flow.
Mm. And what about the countries, the rand or any of the currencies that you track on the continent? Have they been impacted at all by the price of gold?
To a certain extent, I think probably if we look back at the last decade or so, we've been in a period of very strong dollar. It's also come at a time over the last 10 years or so, up until about 2022 again, where a number of emerging market countries, so that's often where you find the production and refining of different industrial raw materials, they've been coming off the back of essentially a rebalance or an adjustment following a boom period. And what we find now is that these currencies look very, very cheap. We're seeing a number of benefits to external accounts, notably as a result of the drop in energy. And particularly in the case of South Africa, where we see reforms in logistics, export volumes should actually rise going forward. And so it's all net positive, essentially, for the underlying economy, the external position of the country, and ultimately the currency will reflect that.
Now we have seen better performance by the mining sector in South Africa. I mean, is this good news for gold miners?
I think it's possibly one of the most important inflection points that we've seen in the gold mining industry for a long, long time. Because what's actually happening is not only have you got a very strong gold price, but the companies themselves are generating record amounts of free cash flow. And credit where credit's due, these companies have essentially addressed a lot of the challenges of the past, and as a result, they are generating huge margins. Now, what they've done to address these challenges, well, we can say that relative to periods in the past where the gold companies haven't matched the performance of the underlying gold price, we've seen pretty good cost management. What we mean by that is that where there are costs associated with the process of mining and refining industrial and precious metals, they've been very disciplined around costs. The management are making good decisions. We expect there to be some consolidation in the industry, but it will be healthy. And again, it's really focusing on generating returns for shareholders, something which in the past hasn't been seen because of some of the areas of the ways that they've made in the past. But certainly in this current cycle, if you're looking at its earnings per share, the amount of free cash flow that's being generated, combined with relatively still cheap stock prices, I would say that this is a very good thing to note when it comes to the gold and precious metal sector. Yeah.
Oh, Matthew Michael, thank you so much for your insight this afternoon on the rather good news regarding the price of gold. Matthew Michael from Schroders. He takes us thank you, sir. He takes us to exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time as we head over now to the markets desk, where Thabiso Lehoko is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, this is Thami. $1 in South Africa is trading at 17 Rand 34. Botswana 13.25. Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 34. And in Zambia it's at 22.71. In Kenya the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 394. In Ethiopia 149 birr 83. Uganda 3,000 shilling 478. And in Tanzania it is trading at 2,000 shilling 461. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,468,000 naira. In Egypt, it's at 47 Egyptian pound 53. Tunisia 2 dinar 917. Algeria 128 dinar 99, and the Moroccan dirham is trading at 922 to the dollar. In Angola the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is at 2,180 to the US dollar. A look at commodities markets. Gold is trading at $4,321 and platinum $1,614 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $60.85 a barrel. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lehoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
It is exactly 4:31. Standing by with your latest from the business of sport. Here is Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good afternoon, Thami. We kick off with football news making headlines. The South African Football Association, SAFA, has announced plans to implement salary cuts of between 5% and 25% for its top earners, including Bafana Bafana coach Hugo Broos. The move comes as the cash-strapped association faces mounting financial pressure and seeks to avoid possible liquidation. The drastic proposal was reportedly discussed during a closed-door meeting held at Mbombela Stadium just hours before Bafana Bafana's 3-0 victory over Rwanda to secure the qualification for the 2026 FIFA World Cup in the United States, Mexico and Canada. The proposal was presented by the Finance Committee chairperson as part of a broader financial review aimed at stabilizing SAFA's struggling finances. The proposed cuts will reportedly affect senior staff members and technical personnel earning above a certain threshold, while lower paid employees are expected to be spared. And stalled contract negotiations cast doubt on Desiree Ellis's availability for the WAFCON qualifiers. There is still no guarantee that Banyana Banyana head coach will be on the bench when the South African senior women's national team takes on the Democratic Republic of Congo in the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations qualifier next week. This is despite the recommendation from SAFA National Executive Committee meeting, which approved a new 4-year contract for her. SAFA CEO Lydia Munyepao revealed that there is still disagreement between Ellis and FA on the terms of her new deal.
Now we are ready to go, but obviously now we have the qualifiers, so close, and we don't have a contract. We don't have a signed contract yet. So obviously, as administration, it kind of puts us in a back foot because now we are under pressure now to ensure that things are done, timelessly, and we might miss some deadlines. But eventually, I think it's really key that we have that contract signed, at the end of the day. I can't comment because we have not signed yet. We are still working on signing the contract.
SABC Sport understands that Ellis is yet to agree to the contract put on the table by SAFA, as it doesn't talk to the achievements she's made in the last 9 years with Banyana Banyana. Ellis's contract with SAFA expired after the Olympic qualifiers in July last year, and since then, she has been operating on a month-to-month contract. Munyepao couldn't answer why it took this long for Ellis to be offered a new long-term contract.
Coach Desiree's contract expired last year, and it was a matter of the technical committee, putting a recommendation to the NEC in terms of, are we reappointing her or are we looking for somebody else? I don't get involved in the appointment.
What I was going to ask, what took this long if it expired last year?
I can't talk on that. But obviously, as an administration, we are guided by the decisions of the NEC. And now, the recommendation was taken to the NEC, and it was approved.
Golf news, Moneyball, Shane Lowry bags his figure sum from DP World India Championship as huge prize money revealed after Tommy Fleetwood win. Tommy Fleetwood pocketed over $676,000 for winning. The Ryder Cup hero came in third in Delhi with a total score of 18, 4 shots shy of overall winner Tommy Fleetwood. For these efforts, the Offaly man bagged $252,000 as he did Alex Fitzpatrick and Tristan Lawrence, who also shared third. Rory McIlroy, who has 7 shots back from Lowry, came in a tie for 26th and left India with $40,000. The big winner, Fleetwood, ended the final round on a tournament clinching 22 and was being able to celebrate it with his son, Frankie. And lastly, the Lesotho Table Tennis Association, LTTA, has received a consignment of equipment from the International Table Tennis Federation as part of the Federation's Global Developmental Program. The LTTA unveiled the equipment at the Lesotho National Olympic Committee premises in Maseru West. The donated items include 10 competition tables, nets, balls, and records pads. Speaking at the event, LTTA President Thabang Mokhele said the donation would make a significant contribution to the development and popularization of the table tennis across the country. The consignment will enable the association to establish more clubs in schools, communities, and various institutions. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fire Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 37 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. Now, South Africa's second largest party, the Democratic Alliance, has launched a piece of legislation that will see the removal of some of the country's racial laws, the Black Economic Empowerment Act, if it gets buy-in from political parties in Parliament. The DA, which is against transformative laws, says BEE has failed to empower the majority of black South Africans and only benefited political elites within the African National Congress.
It's a touchy subject in South Africa, one that has earned the ire of the US President Donald Trump against South Africa, who went to falsely allege that there was a genocide against white people in the country. The purpose of legislation like Black Economic Empowerment was to include blacks who were largely excluded from economic participation during apartheid. Matthew Cuthbeck, DA's head of policy, says BEE was a creation of business that the ANC has now co-opted.
It was literally a group of big white businessmen sitting in a room with ANC political entrepreneurs, media councillors that are available on public record, where they set up the system because it was an easy way for them to subvert the exchange controls process and at the same time try and maintain the status quo for big business by simply buying out politicians. It wasn't included in the Freedom Charter. It wasn't included.
All right, we'll have to come out of that particular piece. Not the best sound, so we do apologize for that. We move to this now. A call has been made to make the protection of women journalists from digital violence a top priority. This follows the official launch of the Statement of Commitment and Call to Action on Safeguarding Journalists Against Online Harms by the Media Development and Diversity Agency and various stakeholders in Johannesburg, South Africa. They made the call for journalists, media houses, digital rights advocates, civil society organizations, as well as policy makers to actively participate in shaping a safer, more inclusive media environment. Ntlantla Mahlango has more.
The digital era has opened new frontiers for journalism, enabling richer storytelling and deeper engagement. Yet, for women journalists, this progress has come with alarming digital risks, online harassment, cyberbullying, and coordinated attacks, amongst others. Experts say these threats not only endanger individual safety, but also undermine press freedom and deepen gender inequality in the media sector. Media owners, editors and managers, journalists, media sector bodies, civil society, regulators and digital platforms acknowledge the escalating online and offline abuse faced by journalists, with greater impact on women, queer and other marginalized media professionals. They say this abuse not only undermines the dignity and safety of individual journalists, but also poses a profound threat to media freedom, public interest, journalism and democracy at large. Mishka Lewis, researcher at the Media Development and Diversity Agency, says when journalists are silenced, critical voices are removed from public discourse.
Women's perspectives and reporting are systematically suppressed. And I think importantly, this is not something that is abstract. It is something that is happening right now in our newsrooms across South Africa. Online violence creates what is called a chilling effect, a climate of fear that undermines journalism itself. And when journalists are forced into silence, we lose vital information.
Zanele Zwane, technical advisor at GIZ, says gender-based violence has been a serious social problem in South Africa for many years now, and the country is reported to have one of the highest ranking global prevalences of GBV.
According to the recent launch of the first ever South African National Gender-Based Violence Prevalence Study, about 35% 0.5% of women in South Africa reported having experienced physical and/or sexual violence during their lifetime. So this demonstrates just the magnitude of the problem. Sustainable and effective and sensitive media reporting on GBV also requires advocacy for freedom of speech and protection of journalists in carrying out their work. This can not only be done by GIZ and the key partners in the media fraternity. We also need key stakeholders, we need media houses, we need the big tech to also take an active involvement in safeguarding women online.
As part of the launch, an expert panelist reflected on the research findings and pledged their commitment to protecting journalists from online abuse and harassment. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
It is exactly 4:42 Central African time. We turn our focus now to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Jamil Mpoma, the Director for Africa at the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, says central to Africa's transformation is unlocking cross-continental opportunities beyond just trade. And the key tool to do this is the African Continental Free Trade Area, a platform to reimagine Africa's place in global markets. Mpoma has called on African governments to harmonize regulations, improve infrastructure, support the building of skills, and create enabling environments for businesses to thrive. Jamil Mpoma, the Director for Africa at the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, joins us live on the line. A very good afternoon to you, Jamil. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm very well, sir, and I hope you are too. Perhaps let's start straight into getting an understanding of what the concrete steps should be that African governments need to be taking, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years, in order to be able to transform economies.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a very pertinent question. At the moment, intra-Africa trade stands at between 13 to 15% of our sort of collective GDPs. The first step that governments should take is really to have a clear commitment to increase our inter-Africa trade to an ambitious but achievable target within the next 5 to 10 years. I believe that having a very clear target helps to then build the relevant building blocks that will create the enabling factors to make this happen. So I think there has to be political will from governments to implement the commitments that have been made. And with clear timescales, this would then be possible to achieve. I think governments should also find ways to proactively, engage the citizenry to support them in understanding the benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But beyond that, there's a lot of work to do. So 5 to 10 years, is quite a significant period. I think institutional systems harmonization needs to take place, and this should take place at the regional and at the national levels. We also need to have harmonization of our, ecosystems in terms of our tax regimes, our laws. So quite a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of preparatory groundwork. And I think at the policy level, there also needs to be, the need for further research, to really understand the benefits and be able to communicate that effectively. So these are some of the main things to be done in the short term.
And what are some of the identified bottlenecks or the challenges that are making it hard to actually implement the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Yeah, look, I think there are several. I mean, obviously, at the moment, if you look at how we are structured as a region, we do have, very different ways of doing business. So if we take a very practical example in terms of, movement, whilst we've committed that, we're going to have free movement of goods and services, that, as an example, is something which is not happening yet. Some countries obviously are ahead of others. If you want to go and do business in Rwanda or Kenya, it's probably easier than some other countries. So, that is just one example, but there are, several other, if you like, bottlenecks that we need to be able to address. I mean, tariffs is important. And, yes, we should try and eliminate tariffs. It will take time for this to happen, but we need to start taking small steps and then drive that incrementally. And again, that is something that should be done, collectively, but then also purposefully, with, commitment from leaders. There are quite a number of barriers. I mean, if you look at, the financial side, even payments, how do we pay? If you are in South Africa, I'm in Ghana, and we're doing business, how easy are we able to make payments to each other? We have the PAPs, which is the payment systems in place, but how do we ease payments? Infrastructure is very poor, road infrastructure, the air infrastructure. So how do we address that? Access to finance, our taxation systems as well. So there are a host of elements to take into account, but this can be done in a very structured way.
And the main barriers to intra-African trade and businesses, how do you propose that those would be addressed?
So I think the main approach to addressing the barriers, in my view, is for a collective effort, from governments and the intergovernmental, if you like, groups to set up the relevant task forces, which will then be looking at each of the areas, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's payment systems, access to finance. It should be looked at a collective level and then filtered down to a country level, where that is then taken from a sort of policy perspective to drive that. So I think the barriers and the challenges are known. The main, I think, bottleneck at the moment is how we then put in place if you like, the implementation measures to address those bottlenecks. Some of them are financial. So if we talk about infrastructure, that requires a lot of investment. So that is a different conversation. Harmonization of, if you like, tax regimes, of, if you like, standards, that is non-financial, but then that also takes a lot of will from our, if you like, politicians, policymakers to work in a coordinated manner to make this happen. So it's about coordination of efforts, it's about clarity and consistency of approach across all countries for us to be able to address these barriers.
And let's focus for a moment there on the role that finance and accounting professionals should be playing in enabling, cross-border trade.
Yeah, look, I think that's a very important point. Obviously, accountants play a very critical role in business. With the current opportunity that the Continental Free Trade Agreement offers, we have a role to really, if you like, bridge the information gap for businesses. So professional accountants, have the opportunity to close the knowledge gap through collaboration with continental bodies. So, for example, we have the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, PAFA, which has member bodies from across almost all African countries. So how do the professional accountancy bodies work with businesses to, if you like, capacitate them on the benefits and of their expectations? So there's that one aspect. There's also another aspect around improving access to finance. So as investors are interested in accessing sustainable business models and opportunities, accountants then have a role to play in guiding them as trusted business advisors. We also would have diversity gaps to address because we have different, if you like, cultural settings and contexts. And I think more businesses would like to explore trade, with other areas of diverse cultures. And this really presents an opportunity for us to be able to help businesses build a trust, understanding of cultures and different ways of doing business. And of course, there's also the piece around, supporting payment systems integration, also driving our clients and our organizations we work with to be able to identify the opportunities that exist in these various countries. So there are several areas that professional accountants would have to play a role. And in fact, I believe that, the work that we need to do, is quite urgent if we are going to be successful.
Yeah, we thank you so much for your time and certainly the urgency there in making sure that there is progress, very much paramount. That's Jamil Mpoma, the Director for Africa at the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
Now, in this week's slot with FNB, we'll look at home ownership as well as affordable housing loans in South Africa. Home ownership in the country is a complex issue marked by a strong desire for property ownership, diverse ownership types, as well as significant economic challenges. As the housing market continues to evolve, understanding these dynamics is crucial for potential homeowners and policymakers alike. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Mfundo Mabaso, FNB Head of Home and Structured Lending. A very good afternoon to you, Mfundo. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thami, thank you very much for having us.
So FNB has unlocked home ownership for over 69,000 families through 23.2 billion rand in affordable housing loans. What do these figures say about the progress that's being made in improving access to housing for low to middle income earners in South Africa? And what would you also highlight perhaps as the key factors driving this?
Yeah, Thami, I think beyond the numbers for us, it is our ability to offer housing to customers that would traditionally not be able to get into homes, for them to, raise their families there, have access to a very valuable investment for their families. And for us, it's driven primarily by wanting to do a little bit more for every one of our customers, whether they're in the affordable housing or in the higher end of the market. So constantly trying to innovate and put product offerings that really make a difference in South Africans' lives. And it's absolutely amazing for us to be able to come back here and tell the story of how we've been able to do that for the affordable housing customer base.
And I wonder how, given the rising cost of living in the country, the broader economic challenges as well that are being faced, how does affordable housing contribute to economic stability as well as financial inclusion? And maybe if you could also just touch on the role that yourselves as FNB play in stimulating this part of the economy.
Yeah, so maybe tell me to break down the numbers a little bit further. If we look at the affordable housing base of customers that got a new home loan and then chose to buy a newly developed property, about 1,100 of them in the last financial year ending June of this year, that resulted in direct job opportunities to the tune of 15,000 job opportunities for those homes that these customers would have bought. So that then means that the customer side of things is that they get a decent home, a big investment for their household, but also they contribute directly or indirectly to job creation through the construction of the home, the electricals that are put into that particular home. But also if you think about what that means for sort of byproduct employment, domestic assistant is then hired, or even a gardener is hired once the family has moved into the home. So you've got a massive ecosystem that then contributes directly into the economy on the back of them investing in a home.
Now, you've pioneered as a bank solutions like the collective buying, first home finance and integrated flips support. And this really all to improve affordability for customers, which you've highlighted is of paramount importance. Can you talk us through how these innovations are transforming the traditional lending models and are actually helping the first-time buyers specifically to be able to enter the property market?
Yeah, so Tammy, if you think about a first-time home buyer, particularly in the lower end of the market or affordable housing, a constrained affordability. So what we've done is that we've deliberately partnered with government to make sure that we can integrate the help that government brings to the table, as well as the product that the customers is using to buy their property. That helps with one, customer experience and customer efficiency in making sure that the customer doesn't have to go and touch a government office whilst also trying to get a home loan. So we're a one-stop shop for the customer, and that is a massive boost for the customer's affordability, but also to help with efficiencies. And then if we just look at a customer who didn't, even with all that help, wouldn't be able to still buy a property. We wanted to enable, from an affordability perspective, products that can get the customer into the home. So with collective buying, it allows up to 12 people to club together and buy the home. Now that could be, a family coming together, friends coming together, investors coming together, whatever the context is, to make the affordability sort of stack up for the customer so that they can actually get into the home. So we're constantly trying to innovate as much as we possibly can beyond just our, a fantastic app and various things that we've put into the market. We want to make sure that we come up with solutions that really solve real life problems for our customers.
And we'll have to leave it at that. Mfundo, Mabaso, some great innovations coming out there and just making it so accessible to everybody, irrespective of where you fall in the socio-economic strata. We thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Thami.
Thank you. Have a good one. That's Mfundo Mabaso. He's FNB Head of Home and Structured Lending. He brings us to exactly 2 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African Time as we say good afternoon to you, Joël.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Tout à l'heure, nous parlerons des réactions en Côte d'Ivoire après l'interdiction des meetings et aussi de la journée de mobilisation ce lundi au Nigeria avec nos correspondants sur place. Restez connectés. Merci Thami.
Yeah, indeed, restez connectés. Well, that's how we come to the end of the Monday edition of Africa in Business. From myself and the entire team, you have yourself a splendid evening further. Restez connectés.